A Game of Thrones, Jon 1. Father took the king down to the crypts this afternoon. The queen didn't want him to go. Benjen gave Jon a careful, measuring look. You don't miss much, do you, Jon? We could use a man like you on the wall. Jon swelled with pride. Robb is a stronger lance than I am, but I'm the better sword, and Hullen says I sit a horse as well as anyone in the castle. Notable achievements. Take me with you when you go back to the wall, Jon said in a sudden rush. Father will give me leave to go if you ask him. I know he will. Uncle Benjen studied his face carefully. The wall is a hard place for a boy, Jon. I am almost a man grown, Jon protested. I will turn 15 on my next name day, and Maester Luwin says bastards grow up faster than other children. That's true enough, Benjen said, with a downward twist of his mouth. He took Jon's cup from the table, filled it fresh from a nearby pitcher, and drank down a long swallow. Daeron Targaryen was only 14 when he conquered Dorne, Jon said. The young dragon was one of his heroes. A conquest that lasted a summer, his uncle pointed out. Your boy king lost 10,000 men taking the place, and another 50 trying to hold it. Someone should have told him that war isn't a game. He took another sip of wine. Also, he said, wiping his mouth, Daeron Targaryen was only 18 when he died. Or have you forgotten that part? I forget nothing, Jon boasted. The wine was making him bold. He tried to sit very straight, to make himself seem taller. I want to serve in the Night's Watch, Uncle. He had thought on it long and hard, lying abed at night while his brothers slept around him. Robb would someday inherit Winterfell, would command great armies as the Warden of the North. Bran and Rickon would be Robb's bannermen, and rule holdfasts in his name. His sisters Arya and Sansa would marry the heirs of other great houses, and go south as mistress of castles of their own. But what place could a bastard hope to earn? You don't know what you're asking, Jon. The Night's Watch is a sworn brotherhood. We have no families. None of us will ever father sons. Our wife is duty. Our mistress is honor. A bastard can have honor too, Jon said. I am ready to swear your oath. You are a boy of 14, Benjen said. Not a man, not yet. Until you have known a woman, you cannot understand what you would be giving up. I don't care about that, Jon said hotly. You might, if you knew what it meant, Benjen said. If you knew what the oath would cost you, you might be less eager to pay the price, son. Jon felt anger rise inside him. I'm not your son. Benjen Stark stood up. More's the pity. He put a hand on Jon's shoulder. Come back to me after you've fathered a few bastards of your own, and we'll see how you feel. Jon trembled. I will never father a bastard, he said carefully. Never. He spat it out like venom. Suddenly he realized that the table had fallen silent, and they were all looking at him. He felt the tears begin to well behind his eyes. He pushed himself to his feet. I must be excused, he said with the last of his dignity. He whirled and bolted before they could see him cry. He must have drunk more wine than he had realized. His feet got tangled under him as he tried to leave, and he lurched sideways into a serving girl, and sent a flagon of spiced wine crashing to the floor. Laughter boomed all around him, and Jon felt hot tears on his cheeks. Someone tried to steady him. He wrenched free of their grip and ran, half blind, for the door. Ghost followed close at his heels, out into the night. Awesome. Where do I even begin? Oh boy. At the beginning, I guess. Jon wants to join the Night's Watch, and he's asking his Uncle Benjen to ask Ned to let him do it. And Benjen tells him that he's too young. Jon's 14. Almost a man grown by the standards of their world, but not quite. He compares his likely futures with the likely futures of his half-siblings. It says Robb would someday inherit Winterfell. It says Brandon Rickon would be Robb's bannerman and rule Holdfast in his name. And it says his sisters Arya and Sansa would marry the heirs of other great houses and go south as mistress of castles of their own. But what place could a bastard hope to earn? So Jon wants to join the Night's Watch because he considers it a place where a bastard can earn his place in the world. Benjen's responses seem like Benjen is trying to dissuade Jon from wanting to join the Watch, because he's describing the vows that they have to take and the sacrifices that they have to make. The Night's Watch is a sworn brotherhood. We have no families. None of us will ever father sons. Our wife is duty, our mistress is honor. You have to realize, to a 14-year-old boy who's trying to make his place in the world, that's not going to dissuade him. That's going to encourage him. Brotherhood, honor, duty. These are things that I think have the opposite effect that Benjen intends with them. Benjen says, "You are a boy of 14. Not a man, not yet. Until you have known a woman, you cannot understand what you would be giving up." So Benjen has shifted his approach here. He seems to have realized that his first approach wasn't working very well. And so now he's making it completely about sex. And the pleasures of sex, maybe more specifically. He's saying, you're not a man until you have sex with a woman. Until you have known a woman. And then known is a way of saying have sex with. "I don't care about that," Jon said hotly. "You might if you knew what it meant," Benjen said. "If you knew what the oath would cost you, you might be less eager to pay the price, son." It's kind of a weird response from Benjen, isn't it? He's being weirdly vague and weirdly ominous about what the oath would cost you and the price. Which suggests that the price is higher than Jon thinks it is, and higher than Benjen is revealing. At least, it can be interpreted that way. Otherwise, Benjen has a mildly weird obsession with the pleasure of sex. And the passage is kind of awkwardly written because of it. But let's suppose that there's a good reason for it, and that it'll all make sense in the end. Because the story's been spectacular for 5 books in a row, so there's every reason to assume that that'll be the case. Let's look at it through the lens of R plus L equals J. The popular and well-established theory that Rhaegar and Lyanna are the parents of Jon. If Jon is the son of Rhaegar and Lyanna, then the price Benjen is referring to is the kingship, the Iron Throne, the most powerful position in the 7 kingdoms, in the continent of Westeros, and maybe even the entire world. Because Jon being the son of Rhaegar makes him a Targaryen, and it means that he has a claim to the Iron Throne. Granted, if Rhaegar and Lyanna didn't marry before conceiving Jon, then Jon would be a bastard, weakening his claim to the kingship. But, given a situation where there are few Targaryens remaining in the world, the lords and common folk and people of Westeros might conceivably make him a king anyway. If for no other reason than because he's the preferred option to few or no other options. Looking at this passage again, this time with the lens of R plus L equals J removed, I notice that if we put into place any other 2 highborn people as Jon Snow's parents, the price that Benjen's referring to, that Jon might not want to pay if he knew about it, is still rather high. Because regardless of which 2 highborn people were the parents of Jon, each parentage, assuming that they're from different houses, would grant Jon a claim to a castle, giving him a claim to 2 castles. 1 castle would have been sufficient to explain the price that Benjen is referring to, but 2 castles would be twice as sufficient, controlling, of course, for the quality of the castle. Either way, a bastard wouldn't complain. Jon references one of his heroes from the stories, Daeron Targaryen, as a person who did something great at his age, to try to persuade Benjen that he is old enough to do great things, such as joining the Night's Watch. Benjen responds, "A conquest that lasted a summer," his uncle pointed out. "Your boy king lost 10,000 men taking the place, and another 50 trying to hold it. Someone should have told him that war isn't a game." He took another sip of wine. "Also," he said, wiping his mouth, "Daeron Targaryen was only 18 when he died. Or have you forgotten that part?" "I forget nothing," Jon boasted. The wine was making him bold. So Benjen contradicts Jon's persuasion by pointing out that Daeron's supposed conquest of Dorne was a colossal failure. Daeron lost 10,000 men taking the place, and another 50 trying to hold it, and then he lost it anyway. So that's 60,000 men who died for nothing. All because this teenage prince had a bad judgment about whether or not he could conquer Dorne and pull it off. Benjen adds that Daeron Targaryen was only 18 when he died. So not only was Daeron's conquest a colossal failure that killed tens of thousands of people, but he didn't even live to see his 20th birthday. In this light, Daeron Targaryen's nickname, the Young Dragon, takes on a new and ironic meaning. In Jon's version of the story, Daeron's youngness is part of his heroism. But in Benjen's version of the story, Daeron's hot-headedness is the reason he didn't get to live long enough to acquire a more mature nickname than the Young Dragon. This fits with the pattern of nicknames in the story being meaningfully false upon closer inspection. But I don't want to talk about that right now. I want to extract a rule of engagement from this passage. This passage may be saying to the reader that if you're so preoccupied with the characters you consider the heroes in the story that you disregard the deaths and the suffering of the common people, you might learn to your dismay that some of the characters who you think are heroes are actually villains. So don't make Jon's mistake, and pay closer attention to the common people who you're not that interested in.